Welcome to Eddie G's Music World Edition 2. This is our second broadcast. We are picking up from where we left off last week with music rock concert reviews from past shows that Eddie G, myself, has seen. Today is April 11th, 2018. And for all those that listen, I'm very happy to have you listen. If there's feedback, feel free to comment on the YouTube channel that you see. Okay, looking back at some old shows, we're going to the next show on my list of concerts that I have seen in the past. Ray Davies, he was one of the main people of the Kinks, and he did a pretty good show back when I saw him in 2006, March. He concentrated quite a bit on his lesser-known music, like Ray Davies solo material, and also some lesser-known Kinks songs. So it was quite a bit alienating for people like me who only knew the more popular Kinks songs that he's done. So I managed to get some enjoyment out of the last 25% of the concert. So it's hard to say it was an amazing show, but there were some highlights towards the end, so it was not a completely lost concert. I also did see Bon Jovi. This is the second time I did see Bon Jovi. He played to a full house. A lot of women went to this concert. It was mostly women in their 20s and 30s, 40s. I was there because, of course, I loved his music, and I had very, very good seats. And when he did a little walk around the Bell Center in Montreal, he walked right by me, and I did pat him on the back. And I guess security, this is a few years ago, was not that heavy, so they allowed for fans to slightly interact with him. So that was how it went down when he did a bit of an interactive moment during his concert. And he's coming back in May. He was supposed to come back in April, but there was some illness in his band, so he postponed it to sometime mid-May. So he'll be coming back. Montreal always does well for him, so he's always going to come as long as he's touring. I see some concerts coming up here that I have seen a long time ago, and the next one was there were comedic shows which I see here, but not going to bother reviewing comedians, so I'm just going to pass through the list of comedians that did concerts. There was a Genesis tribute band called The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Since Genesis is so popular in Montreal, tribute bands came in and did entire albums. So this band was called The Musical Box, actually, and they reproduced The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. This was 2001. I do remember the concert. They were a very, very good tribute band. They sounded a lot like the Peter Gabriel era of Genesis, since he was the lead singer mostly back in those days. They needed someone to sound like Peter Gabriel, so they did the entire album. And very well received. Was not a big place. It was the Spectrum, which no longer exists. They tore it down. And if you love Genesis, then that would have been a great show to see. Another tribute band of Genesis is in my scrapbook that I'm looking at, called Over the Garden Wall. They did also Peter Gabriel era Genesis music in those days. So well received, the same as the band that I just mentioned, which was The Musical Box. Same type of crowd, since people aren't going to get to see Peter Gabriel sing lead for Genesis anytime soon, unless there's some kind of reunion. So those type of tribute concerts are always well received here. I saw Phil Collins a couple of times. I don't have a lot to say about those shows because they're a long time ago. I don't even remember seeing him twice. I remember seeing him once, but I have 2 stubs, so I wasn't the type of person to go looking for ticket stubs and place them in a scrapbook if I didn't see them. He did a lot of switching between singing and drumming. He, of course, was the lead singer for most of Genesis' most popular era, so he sang quite a bit, and sometimes he sang while he was drumming. He would get up and I think he did piano a bit too. He's obviously just as popular as Genesis in this town, so no problem getting people to come out to his show. And he sings great, and he did a great job of replacing Peter Gabriel when Peter Gabriel did leave back in 1974. So those are the two Phil Collins concerts kind of mixed together, because I don't remember them separately that clearly. I come across my many times that I have seen Genesis over the years. They're also way back in my memory, so to individually review them with depth is not something easy to do. I think I saw them the first time was the early 1982 I see here, and that was when they were really selling out quite a bit of stadiums and arenas. They were getting really popular, and I saw them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And there was a time when they kind of like got back together in 2007 was the last time they did that at Olympic Stadium, and all with Phil Collins singing, of course. And Genesis is the type of band that it's extremely difficult to assume that you can just reproduce the records, because they're very complex, a lot of precise instrumentation, and there's so much like in the studio. The guitarist plays bass and guitars. So live, they had to hire Daryl Sturmer to accompany the guitarist. And also another drummer had to be brought in so that Phil Collins could do double drumming. So it's quite a spectacular when Genesis toured back then. There was a lot of very great instrumental performing by the band, and I really thought they were one of my favorites at the time. At this point, there's rumors that there could be a reunion, but I'm not really sure where that's going. They would, I think it would be great to throw Peter Gabriel on stage with Phil Collins, so you can have all the areas of Genesis in one show. But that's just a dream. I see next on the list is my list of 5 times that I saw Peter Gabriel. Similar things. It's when you see an artist 5 times, you really cannot encompass the amazing shows that they did by specifically reviewing show by show, because when you're going back to the early 1980s, which I see was the first time, to the period like late 90s, or 1993, not late, early 90s. So I did see him over a span of 14 years, 5 times. They're all very, very mixed together because the shows were similar. I do remember the first time I saw him, or maybe second and third too, he walked around the old Forum where people could touch him and pat him on the back, just like Bon Jovi did the last time I saw him. And he also stage dived once or twice, back when stage diving was just starting to become popular, mostly with the fans. The artists rarely stage dive, but he threw himself into the audience, and he let people pass him around. I'm sure the fact that he's close to 70 years old by now, he won't be doing that again. I can't see him being that accessible to the fans with all the issues with security nowadays, and the fact that he's pretty old and he doesn't want to be passed back and forth between all these people in the audience. There's a lot of danger, but he's a great singer. He wrote great songs. I don't think he played instruments that much except for the flute in his live concerts. Next, I see we're coming across some ticket stubs for April Wine, a Canadian band, Montreal based, but not really all from Montreal. They kind of formed from different parts of the Maritimes and Montreal. Never massive in the US, but they did have a couple of years in the early 80s where they sold a couple of million records out there. So I saw them the first time with the opening act, Loverboy. I was amazed by that concert. It was full because April Wine was at their peak, and Loverboy was also big at the time. and they filled the Forum. At the time, it was Montreal Forum, and they didn't move till that didn't close till the mid '90s when the Forum, the Bell Center, opened up. But they sold out that first show, and over the years that followed, their shows got less. They weren't in the same size venues. They were more or less in smaller clubs, or like Metropolis. I think there was an outdoor show I saw them at in the summer. There were shows in smaller clubs like Bourbon Street West. I think I saw them there once. So over the years, they became a little less popular, but in Montreal, they're a staple. They've always been big. And if Miles Goodman wants to tour, he just brings out, I think he's the only original member. So he'll just bring out people. Obviously, the drummer is long since retired. He is probably in his late 70s by now. And other members, guitarists, have come and gone. So he's managed with some great players that are still in the band to sound as good as the records, and live they're very good. So if you ever have the opportunity to go to a concert by them, you should definitely go. George Thorogood and the Destroyers next up on the list. Many times he has come to Montreal. He's a popular act over the years. He's toured. He's never been a major star, like a rock star, a huge arena type of guy, but he's always managed to be popular, especially here. He's got the bluesy style. He's copied a lot of people, guitar riffs that made him famous. He's had a couple of songs in a commercial, so he's comes around every year or two for the last 40 years probably, and always manages to make it a good show. I only saw him the one time. I wouldn't say I would go see him again, but that's because at this point I don't really see as many concerts as I used to. I've cut down quite a bit over the years. A band that I see here 3 times. Kiss. I did see them in the early 1992. Then the reunion tour in 1996, where all 4 original members got back together. Then a little bit later, 1998. And I might have missed. I'm pretty sure I saw them in 2009. I know I did. So I did see them 4 times, actually. The ticket stub is on a different page. That's why. So I saw them 4 times. I remember not liking them as much when I saw them without their makeup on. They looked, they didn't quite have the same appeal. There was less fun in the crowd. It was a smaller crowd. But the best of the 4 shows that I did see was the reunion, and of course with Peter Criss and Ace Frehley. They brought a lot of fun back into the show since they're originals, and Ace is an amazing guitarist, and of course Peter Criss, a great drummer, even though Paul Stanley in his book doesn't say that, puts him down pretty badly. But look, if Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons hired him back then, there must have been a reason. Couldn't have been just because he had his own set of drums with him. So I think maybe there was just a bit of a personality clash between Paul Stanley and Peter Criss back in the day, and that led to a lot of friction. I know on tour they fought quite a bit in the last big tour they did in Australia and elsewhere. After that the 4 concerts that I saw, there was one time that I did see Ace Frehley. He did his songs that he had sang with Kiss, and he did the guitar where the smoke came out of the guitar, and big crowd as well. It was at the Metropolis bar. So, look, he goes out on tour. He seems to be getting more and more popular now. He's becoming buddies again with Gene Simmons. I think Ace Frehley is doing a few shows with Gene's solo band. So they seem to be patching things up, and who knows, there could be a reunion in the works, maybe on tour. There's rumors that Ace Frehley will pop in here and there, and Tommy Thayer will have to take a break for a few songs. I was a little bit miffed that after the Ace Frehley concert, I did not get an autograph from him. he left 40 or 50 people standing with their cameras and their papers and their albums, with their pens poised for Ace to sign. And unfortunately, he refused, and he brushed by the crowd and into his little van, and off he went. I saw Wang Chung when I was in New York on vacation. He was at the B.B. King Blues Club in Times Square. Naked Eyes opened for them. It was more like Naked Eye, because Naked Eyes is two main people, but one of them, the keyboard player, did not manage to get past the border. He had some issues to get into the States. So it was just one guy, but he was playing with an acoustic guitar. It was okay. It wasn't anything to get excited about. And Wang Chung was the headliner. They played all their hits, and it was not an exciting show, but it was just something to pass a couple of hours of time. It was not overly memorable, but it was not terrible either. In 2010, I saw Jonas. I had won the tickets in a bar in Saint Lazare. Jonas, he's the kind of guy that he acts like he's a bigger rock star than he is, meaning he had all the hair flips and all the rock star posing. But the truth is, he's never been a big star. But give him credit, he acts like he is on stage. Maybe that's all that he wants out of life, and to give off the air of a major star when you're playing for like 200 people. His music is okay, but he's very generic. He sounds there's talent there, him and his guitars that they grew up with or whatever. But the overall feeling on the show was like he's kind of a bit of a poser, but he's trying. I guess he wants to be a huge star. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing illegal about trying to be a bigger star than you are. Here's my AC/DC page. Saw them 3 times in the year 2000, in the year, I see here, 2009, and there was one other time, I think 2015. All with Brian Johnson, the lead singer. Over the years, I think Malcolm Young was in 2 out of 3 of these shows. The third one in 2009, he was already out of the. In 2015, he was already out of the band, and now after the last show, Brian Johnson's out of the band. They've always impressed me live. The Schoolboy Angus Young shtick works pretty good. He always backs up his stage gimmicks with talent. So if you're going to dress up like a little schoolboy and it's kind of cute, and you don't have the ability to play guitar like he does, then it doesn't come across that well. But he does, and he's the focal point of the band. So even though they've tossed out Brian Johnson for his hearing problems, which I don't, it's a bit sad that they did it, they'll still, the rumor is that they're trying to get Axl Rose to sing on the next record, which will probably mean another tour. So if you go to see AC/DC next time around, there's a decent chance Axl will have wound down the Guns N' Roses touring, which is winding down currently, and he'll end up going back on the road with AC/DC. It's not a fact. It's not confirmed. It's rumors, but I wouldn't be shocked if that happened. So those were 3 amazing concerts I did see, and I can't say I regret that in any way. Here's 2 bands that are on the same page in my scrapbook. They are Yes and Asia. Linked, of course, because Asia member Steve Howe was in Yes, so that's why I kind of put them in the same type of category. I did see Yes early on when it was the Buggles singer was the singer who replaced Steve John Anderson. Sorry, I think it was Trevor Howe, or not Trevor Howe, not Trevor Rabin. I forget who it was, but he was the lead singer of the Buggles, so he replaced the lead singer John Anderson on the first show that I saw with Yes. Over the years, people came and went. John Anderson was at every show that I did see, and I would definitely say that they were high-level, great quality concerts that Yes did. I think towards the end, the last show I saw with Yes, I got a little bored because the late Chris Squire did like a 25-minute bass solo, and I'm sorry, I'm not questioning his ability to play bass, but to hear him pluck away for 20-something minutes, I almost left the building. It was so boring because it just went on too long. So that excess type of way that they carried on at that last show meant that I would never go see them again, just because I don't want to sit through that. Even though Chris Squire's no longer alive, maybe got a little too much. Since then, Yes has splintered off into two camps. There's a Rick Wakeman camp with two other guys. I think Anderson, Wakeman, and one other. I think Trevor Rabin. And then there's another faction. I'm not 100% sure, but I think Steve Howe is heading up that one since he was the main guitarist in Yes. So they're both touring around, and you can see one at one time and another group, another faction that calls himself Yes something else another day. So they're all split apart. So that brings me to Asia, who I did see twice. The first time I saw Asia was not with John Wetton. It was, I don't remember the name of the lead singer. He was there for the mid-90s. It was a very small club, which I like seeing concerts in a small club. So I did get close up to see Steve Howe playing this guitar. He was in the first Asia concert that I saw, and he was very impressive in the way he played. And when you're that close to somebody playing, you really can sense the amazement of the music. Later on, I saw Asia again in 2010, I believe, yeah. And that was with John Wetton, the original singer of Asia. He came back into the band. That was a good show, too. Carl Palmer was in the band then, too. And Steve Howe and Trevor... Not Trevor. I forget the name of the keyboardist. It skips my mind. But the guy from the Buggles was in this version of Asia. It'll come to me at some point. And the reproduction was great from all their hits. John Wetton's voice was a pleasure to hear. He sang beautifully, and no more than 3-4 years later, he passed away. So I'm glad I did get to see a legend like John Wetton, who had been in bands like UK and Roxy Music as well. Plus, he played bass. As I see, my next page is filled with two different acts that I have seen. One act, maybe, I think it was Cheap Trick, I saw 5 times. That's the next act on the list. Saw them very, very early in their career. Not in the career, but at least for me, it was early. It was the early 80s. I think Billy Idol opened for them in the Forum of Montreal. Very full house. People, Cheap Trick was getting a lot of hits on the radio at that time. So very commercially popular. And I've always loved the guitars in that band. Robin Zander's music, Bunny Carlos's drumming, Rick Nielsen's guitar, and I think I mentioned everybody. Rick Peterson's bass. Every time I've seen Cheap Trick, they've always impressed. There was one time where they played a concert opening for Pearl Jam where they'd seemed very, very, very out of place. They were not well received because the crowd, this is about 1998, and the crowd was there to see Pearl Jam, and they just didn't seem into Cheap Trick at all. So they were kind of a little lost show for them. But I did see them 5 times altogether. And I'd probably be tempted to go see them again if they did go back out on tour and come to Montreal. They tour constantly. They do cruises on boats. I mean, you name it, they're always doing some kind of show. But for the last time they were supposed to be here was about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5. And they were supposed to go to Metropolis. I didn't have tickets, but I was thinking about it. And they canceled the show due to what they called a scheduling conflict. But a lot of times these so-called scheduling conflicts are because they only sold half the seats. And I guess maybe if they don't sell enough seats, it's not worth it for Cheap Trick to bother to come across the border or come to Montreal and do a show. But I'll never know what the scenario was for that last show, and they haven't been back since. So maybe they're just less popular every few years. I was lucky enough to see see the Police twice in the very first stages of their touring. So that's the next ticket stub I have. I I saw them in 1980 and 81, I believe. The first show was at Théâtre Saint-Denis. I knew that they had just started to catch on, Message in a Bottle and all that. And there was a sold out show. I was quite impressed with their ability to reproduce their records live. They had a lot of energy, and I'm glad I went to that concert. It was a long time ago. Don't remember major details. The second one was at another University of Montreal. They had a venue, and they came back. I think it was within 2 years of the first concert I saw with them. It was a bit more of a reggae kind of feel to a lot of their songs because they had a new album out that was a little bit more, less hard rock. Let's put it that way. But I still enjoyed it. Sting was playing as standing bass, if I recall, and they toured a bit more. But within 2-3 years, they had, I think, broken up, and then they did a big reunion in the about 2010 or something like that. And I almost went to see them for the reunion, but I said, well, I've seen them twice. And the truth is, they haven't come out with any records since the mid 80s. So I didn't feel I needed to bother to see them a third time. I just let them come in and out of town. Another artist that I see here that I have seen 2 times was a guy very well known for about 3 songs, Gary Numan. First time I did see him was when his song Cars came out, and that was at his peak. I remember working for Shome Radio in Montreal, and I didn't actually have a full-time job there. I just did volunteer work, but to me, it was a job, and they weren't paying, but they gave me free tickets. So I went to see Gary Numan for free in 1980, and the ticket price is written $8.50. Prices have gone up since then. And he did his Car song, and other ones, Our Friends Electric, and other songs. I remember him driving around in a little toy car on the stage, like a little track was laid out for him on the stage in the Forum, and I enjoyed that. Then later on, I saw him in a smaller venue in 2001. I think it was Cafe Campus or something, but it was not. It was quite a different amount of people for the second show. By 2001, of course, he's no longer a current act. He's more of an oldies act. And when you only have 3 hits, you're not going to get thousands of people. He probably had maybe 300 people there. And one thing he did, which I'm not a huge fan of, he took his major song Cars, and he changed the beat, and he changed the routine, and he changed how he sang it, and it was all like revamped. So while people expected to hear the original version, they didn't get it. And in that sense, it was a bit disappointing. But, he came back 2-3 years later. A friend bugged me to go, and I said, you know what? Twice is enough. I don't have to keep going to see Gary Numan every time he comes to town. Billy Idol. Okay, I did see him twice. First time he was headlining at the Forum. I believe it was the Cult that opened up for him. They were just starting out, the Cult. It was the late 80s or so. About 87 or 86. Yeah, 1987. And Billy was great back then. He was his peak year. He was, in the midst of his most popular era. I even knew his music when he was in a band called Generation X, like in the late 70s. I had a friend that lent me the Generation X album, so I knew his style way back when I was like 17 or 18 years old, before he was a solo star. So I already knew his music before he was a big star. And of course, he's got those catchy, punky style of songs, and a lot of it looked like a gimmick to me with his lip curls and everything, but he backed it up with some great singing. And Steve Stevens is a really great guitarist. He's been his guitarist, maybe not throughout his long career, but most of the time. And a little known fact about Steve Stevens is that he played the guitar on Michael Jackson's Dirty Diana song, which was a #1 song. So that's very good guitar work on that song if you ever hear it. And of course, he's been playing guitar for the most part with Billy for all this long time. I see the Cult, as I just talked about, them opening for Billy Idol on the first concert I saw with Billy. I saw them as a headliner at the Forum. That was in the late 80s when they were really peaking at the time. They were a huge band, Billy Duffy's guitar. I thought that was one of my favorite shows. And their sound was really good. And I got a chance to see the future drummer for Guns N' Roses, Matt Sorum. He was in the Cult at the time. He replaced the drummer from Guns N' Roses later on, since he had drug problems, and the guy from the Cult stepped in his shoes and replaced Steven Adler in Guns N' Roses. So the Cult was headlining at the time. I wish I could remember who opened for the Cult, but little details sometimes slip. Maybe there was no opening act. Sometimes that happens too. Then I did see the Cult later on. I remember the last time I saw them was 2001, and I did not enjoy the concert for one reason. It was standing room only in the Metropolis, and I'm 6'2", and I remember some guy was starting to fight with me verbally and threaten me because I was blocking his view, and he was like getting mad, and I had to keep moving to get out of his way. And there was also this hour and 20-minute delay before the concert started, and all these people were crushed into this club, this big club, Metropolis, and it was a hot summer night, and people were getting very frustrated, waiting, and tempers were getting a little high. And when you put people through that, especially me, I don't forget that you made me sit through that and wait and stare at an empty stage for over an hour and get uncomfortable standing around waiting for concerts to start. So when you do that, I don't want to see you again. And I haven't seen the Cult since, and I've turned down a couple of people that have said, let's go to the Cult, they're great, blah, blah, blah. No, don't want to go see the Cult. I've seen him like 3 times or 4 times or whatever, and I think I've had my limit with the Cult. Okay, Honeymoon Suite. I know I've seen them, I'm going to say twice, but I think it's actually 3 times. Once was free live, the last time about 8 years ago. The first time was 1992. I saw them in the Brick. That was their best time. I've always been a fan of their music, and I got really close to the stage, and I could hear this music very clearly, and the songs were great, so I liked it. The second time I didn't enjoy it, but not because of the music. It's because I was talking to a pretty girl who was next to me. I mean, she wasn't overly into me. She was just being friendly. So I was talking to her a little bit in between songs. It's loud when the music's playing. But, she was cute, and I was going to ask for her number at the end of the concert. And just as I was about to try to talk to her at the end of the show, Johnny D, the guitarist for Honeymoon Suite, he jumps off the stage and grabs her by the arm and walks out of the club with her, or at least walks into the backstage with her. So I'll never know, since obviously I don't have ability to go back 20-something years to ask anyone, if that was his girlfriend and she was just there to watch her boyfriend play guitar, or he just figured, why not try to pick her up and take her backstage and just take her away, because he's like not a huge star, but I mean, maybe because he was somewhat successful guitarist, he thought he could just pick her up. So whatever happened, it wasn't like a big deal to me. She wasn't my girlfriend. I wanted to just talk to her a little more and see where it went, but I did not get I never went anywhere further, obviously. So Johnny D, whatever happened, I guess I'll never know. Rush. Seen them, I'm going to say 5 times. First time I saw them was my very, very first concert in 1974. Them, meaning Rush, and Rory Gallagher opened up for Nazareth. And I don't have the ticket stub for it, but I figured I'll discuss all of the concerts I saw with Rush. But I did see them 4 more times. One time, I'm going to say it was early 80s, 81. The sound quality was so bad. I don't know what it was. I was a bit high up in the crowd. Me and my friend at the time, we walked out towards the last few songs remaining. We walked out of the concert. We just couldn't. It wasn't enjoyable. It was muffled. So we just figured, what the hell, we'll get out of there. But Rush is a great band, instrumentally superior to most bands. One of the few times I've seen a guy playing keyboards and bass almost at the same time. Like, he would play bass, stop, and switch to keyboards. Talking about Geddy Lee. So it's rare to see somebody be able to switch from one instrument to the other. I saw with Michael Schenker band, the guy played keyboards and bass at the same time. He was playing bass with one finger and playing keyboards with the other hand. So he took it one step further than Geddy Lee did, because he not only did he play one instrument and then not just go to the next instrument, he did them both at the same time. Rush, the last time I saw them, it was almost their last tour. It was 2000 and I'm looking at the stub. It looks like 2007, or maybe it was 2008. It doesn't really matter. And they have drifted off. They seem to have stopped touring due to Neil Peart wanting to retire. And I guess the band doesn't sound like they want to reform or hire some drummer and go back out on tour. It looks like they may just have hung up the concert touring that they used to do. They're all well off. They're in their mid-60s. Maybe they just figured it's time to stop. Saw another guy, Jonathan Richman. Not a huge star, kind of a fringe type of act. He played 2 different shows in the early 80s that I went to see. And I kind of liked him. He's kind of a humorous singer. He sings about funny things. I did talk to him a bit before his show, but his manager said he doesn't like to talk before the concert, so he just smiled at me and walked away. But not that memorable. I just thought he was fun. I think he still tours, because I saw him that he was supposedly coming back to Montreal this summer, or maybe in the spring. I don't remember when. So the guy still has a bit of an audience left over all this time. I have on my list next 2 ticket stubs by Aerosmith. First time I saw them, 1977, one of my earlier shows. Opening act was Rick Derringer from the McCoys, and also he had Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo. He was great back then. And Aerosmith, it was a long time ago. I don't remember the details of it. I thought it was a good show. And I appreciated the fact that I was there. And when you're 17 years old, you go to a concert. It's a lot of fun, usually. The next time I saw them was 2006. So quite a large gap in between seeing Aerosmith. I remember I went to the side of the stage, and Steve Tyler, he reached out. He saw me there, and I guess it's something he does. He knew I was a big fan from looking at me, obviously. And he reached out with his hand, and he locked fingers with me while he was singing one of his songs. And I've never seen so many rings, so many gorgeous rings on this person's hand in my life. I was tempted to slip one of the rings off, but I'm pretty sure he would have broken my hand if I tried that. So I didn't do that. I saw a band called the Donnas. There was a period in the early 2000s. I had a friend that liked to see a lot of lesser known bands, like not huge bands, but it was okay. It was a bunch of all girl band. It was a Club Soda. I didn't know any of the songs, so it wasn't really a major, brilliant, fun show, but it was okay. They sang okay, and they were not big for a long time, but they had a bit of a following. Another act, I don't know why I went to this act, because he only had one hit, and I don't even think he's still around. Peter Himmelman, whose claim to fame was more about marrying Bob Dylan's daughter than anything else. So he never, I don't know if they're still married. I don't keep up on these things, but he had a song called 130 Days or something. It was a small club, Club Soda, when it used to be on Park Avenue. And I don't know, it was a pretty forgettable concert when you only have one song. I mean, it killed the evening. It wasn't terrible. But again, it was not that memorable either. And I don't remember Peter Himmelman having a long career in music. I don't think he's ever been a big act. I mean, I once looked him up, but I don't remember what he's doing. And the next concert was a show that I didn't really like all that much. Bob Dylan in 1990. And our seats were pretty high in this University of Montreal concert hall that they had. I don't know, the guy was croaking out his vocals, but that's what he's known for. And it was kind of a sloppy show. Didn't really appreciate it that much. It was not terrible, but it was not a show that I've never seen him in the 28 years since then come all the time. And because once I get a bad show out of someone, I'm not saying I'll never see them again, but in Bob Dylan's case, I just never bothered to see him again. I guess I still could. He still tours, but I doubt it. I doubt if I bother with him since I don't go to as many shows as I used to. Here's a guy with a great story connected to him, Peter Frampton. I tell this story so much, I'm tired of telling it. And I've told it on Twitter. I've told it on other websites. I tell it to everybody. I was only 20 years old. I did see Peter Frampton in 1980. This is just after his really big Frampton Comes Alive. But the story is more about him after the concert was great, by the way. It was in some kind of skating rink in the West Island. Musically, I love the guy. His guitar is amazing. All his singing, everything. But I found out where he would be later, met him, talked to him a bit. He fell down completely drunk on the street. He jumped out of a low window, not high enough to hurt him, but he fell down into the street. And I was not far, and I went and picked him up. And since then, I probably tweeted him 5 times and went to his website and sent messages asking him to thank me for the fact that I picked him up, which is stupid of me, let's face it. The guy doesn't remember being picked up off the street drunk. I'm sure he's been picked up off the street drunk more than once in his past when he was young. And, you know, now he's not like that anymore. He's sober. He's got a family, so he doesn't want to be bothered. But it would be nice of him to have just acknowledged the fact that I did that, but he chooses to ignore it. It's okay. I've gotten over it. It's almost, it's 38 years later. I did see Walter Rossi as well. A guy that never became a huge star, but he had a few good songs back when I saw him early 80s, 1982. And funny enough, a guy I worked with about 10 years ago was trying to advise Walter Rossi on career choices, like how to make money, because I think he was low on money. I mean, he never made it outside of Canada. He was never like a Bryan Adams type of successful Canadian guy. So he probably, you know, I think my friend was trying to get him to re-release some old albums and maybe tour to make money. But I don't know. The guy's probably in his late 70s by now, so I'm pretty sure that's not happening for him. Here's a band, another one of these bands I got dragged to that I didn't really like all that much. Ragga which was some kind of reggae type of rock band, and Biff Naked, who later on got on TV shows and hosted like talk shows or whatever she did. She was terrible to me. I mean, not to me, but I remember seeing her concert and it was like screaming, but just incomprehensible screaming type of music. And it was terrible to me. And I think I convinced my friend to leave, or I was begging him to get out of there because I really, you know, hated the concert. It was like listening to somebody dying in a hospital. And I didn't hear anything musical that I could find appealing about it. But I either left early, or I just ran out of there as soon as she finished, just so I could just forget her horrible concert as quick as I can. Veruca Salt, seen in the Spectrum, which is no longer around. It was torn down about 10 years ago. They had a song called The Seether and a couple of other minor, medium-sized alternative type of songs, and they were big at the time. It's one of these examples of a band that's, peaks, and then within 2-3 years, they're kind of already not popular anymore. But I think I remember enjoying it. There were two girls playing guitars and singing, and it was an okay show. Another band that is more about gimmicks. Musically, they're probably talented. The Residents, they would dress up like Martians on the stage. They had very avant-garde music. I liked them because they were weird and they had a bit of quality to their concerts. So it was a long time ago, but I did go. And they're kind of a cult feeling type of band. It was 1986, so that goes way back. I see another show on Eddie G's Music World, which is a YouTube show available on my channel, Eddie G's Music World. So you can expect other shows coming up. Maybe I'll be bringing in guests. Ideally, invite some artists onto the show and make it a little more interactive with people. But we're at the infancy of my show, Eddie G's Music World. So we're taking it step by step, and I'm enjoying doing it for people. And if anybody listens, be happy to hear you comment in the comment section. This is part 2 about going over old concerts I've seen in the past. I'm looking at another, the ticket stub, the Divinyls. They had a song called I Touch Myself, and another one. I liked it, but it wasn't overly, there's not a lot of comments I can make about a concert that was so long ago, and I didn't feel it was that memorable, but I still found that it was good enough to enjoy the moment, the night out that I had going to the concert. And so that's from way back. That was also at the Spectrum, a small club. Not small, I shouldn't say that, but not as big as the Forum or anything like that. Another Spectrum show, coincidentally, on the next name on the list was The Box. They had a song called Closer Together with Sass Jordan and a couple of other good songs. They're a French-Canadian band that was big back in the early 80s. And they're probably still around. I think the guy Mark something is still doing material, maybe recording still. But they kind of had a tiny bit of popularity in the US, but it was short-lived, so they never became a major act. But I still remember thinking it was worth the concert that I did see. I've got a concert here. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I saw them in the early 1980s, 1981. Again, I won the ticket, and I loved that concert. I was far away because when you win tickets, here's an anecdote. Normally, when you win tickets on the radio, they're not the worst seats, but they're certainly far from the best. So I was very far back, low down, but Tom Petty was great live, and I did see him. And I might as well throw in the next Tom Petty concert because I saw him again in 2014. And they actually interviewed me on television about what I thought of the concert or what I thought of him, and I gave some positive discussion about it. And I love seeing that. I'm very glad I did see it because, of course, Tom Petty, 2.5 years later, died. So if I didn't go to that show, that means I would have only seen him once, and obviously you can't see him again. Interesting enough, in the news, 2018 news, Mike Campbell, the guitarist for Tom Petty, has just joined Fleetwood Mac, replacing Lindsey Buckingham, who either quit or got pushed out of Fleetwood Mac. Nobody knows the whole story because they're kind of closed-lipped about these type of undertakings in bands, a lot of friction maybe between him and his ex-wife, or Mick Fleetwood or John McVie. We never know the whole story. One show that the next show on my list was a show that I once told somebody that I went to the show and they were freaking out that I was lucky enough to have seen this act live. So the year was 1984. And yes, at the Olympic Stadium, I saw the Jacksons, featuring, of course, Michael. And he was dancing up a storm. I had pretty good seats, probably 20 rows back in the big Olympic Stadium. And it was such a state of euphoria because Thriller had just started to build up some steam. It was like already a year old, but the Thriller album was so big, it took 3 or 4 years to pull all the, the popularity continued for years. It didn't just have a 1 year run. It was 2-3 years of selling and euphoria about the record. And I loved that. I was only 24, and it was great seeing the whole band of his brothers with him too. They did some old Jackson 5 songs too, and of course Michael Jackson was the highlight, singing and dancing for his solo material that he was known for. That was one of the great shows that I've seen in my life. And here's a band, the next one. Not a lot of people know who these guys are. I like them live. Not sure if they ever really had a long career. It was Guided by Voices. This was 1996. They never got airplay in Montreal, pretty much. But there must have been one song that I had heard somehow. And a friend of mine convinced me to go. And I liked it. It was a fun show. Pretty much alternative style. Not the kind of concert you see that often in Montreal, but I'm glad I went. Here's my last page of shows for today. There'll be another excerpt of music concerts for my next show, because I have a book of ticket stubs, and while I'm at it, I might as well just keep going with this. Maybe there are people that enjoy hearing about concerts, and if you do have a concert you liked, or even if you want to criticize my show or compliment it, you can do so at Eddie G's Music World and use the comment section. Iron Maiden, very good band. Saw them in 2000. Lead singer impressed me with his amazing vocals. He could sing high notes. It was a sold-out show, and I list this as one of my favorite shows too, because it was just one of those nights where the band takes you away and you get a lot out of the concert, and I did get quite a bit of enjoyment out of that show. Next is a band. It was a Who tribute band, and this is called the Hooligans. This was maybe 30 years back. Mid-'80s. Not a lot to say about them. I mean, they did a good job of copying the Who's music, and for that they're commended. And the next band was the Who that I saw, 1997. Entwistle was still the bass player. The drummer was Richard Starkey's son, Zach Starkey, and of course the other main guys, Pete and Roger, holding up the band. They did the Quadrophenia album from start to finish, which I think is a double album. And I didn't know all the songs, but I was quite impressed by the show. Zach Starkey was a great drummer. He definitely filled the shoes of Keith Moon admirably. I know that his father's a great drummer too. People don't give Ringo Starr credit because he's kind of laid back in his style. He's not very fast, but to pull off all the Beatles music, you have to be impressed. And the Who, Roger was in fine voice, and Pete played great guitar. So I love that concert. Next on the list, on this last page of concert reviews on Eddie G's Music World, Treble Charger and Eve 6. Both good bands. Eve 6 had 2 or 3 songs at the time. I think Desperately Wanting was one of them, and Treble Charger had some upbeat music too. It was a good double bill back in 2000. Not sure what these two bands are up to at this point. They could be like in the trash heap of old bands that don't exist anymore, for all I know. 5440, saw them in 2001, very close to a few months before 9/11. So the world was in a peaceful moment that night, early 2001. And they had about 7 or 8 well-known pop songs in the Montreal scene that I went to see the concert because of that. And I liked the concert. They played all their hits that I knew, and they did a good. There was a lively crowd, and I remember the singer being really into it too. And I don't even know if they're still around. They could be, but I'll have to look into it. And I'll end off the show with the next band on my list, where there are, I think if you count all the concerts, there's 3 of them. But I'll just do a general review of Styx, since I did see them 3 times. Once with Dennis DeYoung, which was a free show in Place des Nations, Man in His World. It was free concert. It was a little bit of rain that night, but I got to see the original Styx, at least the main band that was then, with Dennis DeYoung. Sound quality wasn't the best because outdoor concerts I've never liked. They're always terrible sound quality if you're far away, and you don't get to appreciate them as well. And there's something about Styx. I've seen them 3 times, and God only knows, I have never seen them indoors. I don't know what it is. They never seem to come indoors, but they actually are coming indoors in a few weeks, with Joan Jett in the Laval Bell concert hall. So I could go to see them indoors for the first time, but Laval is very far from where I live. And for that reason, I don't feel like running out to see Styx for a 4th time. But I've always been a big Styx fan. I liked the last concert I saw with them, which was in a shopping mall in Fairview. Gowan was the lead singer, and they do all their songs. I mean, they're fan favorites, and they're troopers. They've been around for 45 years, and they still have a lot of people that were still in the band at the beginning are still there, not Dennis DeYoung. And that brings me to my last concert review for Eddie G's Music World for the day, Dennis DeYoung. I also won tickets for that. It was around 2010 or 11, something like that. 13, actually. I just saw the date. And he was great. He did all his major songs that he's known for as a singer as one of the co-lead singers of Styx. With Shaw sang quite a bit too, but Dennis DeYoung, of course, sang most of it. And I wish Styx would get back together. It's another example of how a band would improve themselves by putting the main guy back in. But there were fights between them and DeYoung when he didn't want to go on tour, when he was coming off an illness, and the band got impatient, and they hired, I think, Gowan right away after that point, and he's been with the band since probably 18 or 19 years. So again, you've got a band that doesn't have all its people together, and if they did, they would be better. So this was Eddie G's Music World, episode 2, concert reviews. There's more coming. I'm going to continue down the path next week with another show about concerts that I have seen, and I hope whoever's listening today and last week will come back next week. And it's an adventure. We're taking it week by week, and I'm appreciating all the fun that I'm having doing the show. Eddie G's Music World, done for another episode 2, old concert reviews that I've been to. Thank you very much, and I hope to hear from you soon, and see you soon.